Story 1. The Olive Farmer of Latium. You awaken to the soft rustling of olive leaves under the early Italian sun. It is quiet in the hills of Latium just as it has always been. The year is 83 BCE, though to you, years pass not by politics or wars, but by the regular rhythm of seasons and harvests. You are Lucius Cassius Gallus, an olive farmer as your father was, and his father before him. You rise not from a marble bed, but from a straw mat laid over wooden slats, the kind that creaks gently under your body weight as you sit upright. Your house is a villa rustica, simple, functional, and entirely unremarkable. Built from local stone with a roof of clay tiles, it has 2 rooms for sleeping and a main room for eating and oil pressing during poor weather. Everything smells faintly of pressed olives and aged wood. You move quietly through your routine because the day has not yet properly begun. There is no running water, only a well dug by your grandfather and a large basin for catching rain. You wash your face with cold water and use the same worn cloth to dry your hands. The weather today promises warmth, but not scorching heat. The kind of day made for pruning trees. Breakfast, such as it is, consists of day-old bread soaked in olive oil. Sometimes, if fortune smiles, you add a few dried figs or a smear of cheese. You chew slowly, not from leisure but necessity. The bread is hard and your teeth, while still mostly whole, have grown sensitive. Your slaves, 6 in total, are already beginning their work. You are not a rich man, not by Roman standards, but your father left you enough land to require help, and slaves are how things are done. They are not friends, nor are they family, but they live and work alongside you, sleep in the adjoining shed, and occasionally murmur in Greek when they think you cannot hear. You hear, of course, but you do not mind. The land, that sacred stretch of olive trees, holds the truth of your days. Each tree is known to you by shape and history. One was nearly destroyed by lightning the year the consuls were Marius and Carbo. Another leans, stubbornly, refusing to grow straight no matter how you prop it. Your tools are worn but cared for. A curved blade for pruning, a small ladder and baskets made from woven reeds. The oil press, a screw press modeled after Greek design, sits beneath a stone awning, darkened with decades of use. There is no drama here, no intrigue. The work is cyclical. You prune branches to encourage growth, collect fallen olives, and inspect for signs of rot or disease. Occasionally, you spread manure, mostly from your own animals or from trades with neighbors. Once a year in late autumn, you press the oil and store it in amphorae sealed with wax. You sell most of your oil to a trader who comes by cart from Rome. The man never smiles and rarely haggles. You suspect he waters down your product before selling it in the city, but you are not interested in chasing profit beyond your grasp. You are content with what you have: stability. Your wife Livia tends the small garden where she grows herbs, onions, and legumes. She rarely speaks during the morning hours. She has always believed the land listens more in silence. She is kind, but not warm. She has lost 2 children to fever, and since then she lives with a quiet detachment that even time cannot undo. Your one surviving child, Marcus, is away at a local school, a rudimentary arrangement led by an aging Greek freedman who insists on copying pages of Homer by candlelight. You send Marcus because you want him to read and write, to perhaps one day sell oil in his own name with a touch more wisdom. He dreams of the city, but you know the city is where simple men are devoured by complexity. By midday, you sit in the shade of your favorite olive tree, a gnarled old thing with roots that stretch like fingers clutching the earth. You eat again more bread, a small piece of salted fish, and a few olives that you set aside during sorting. You think not of Caesar or Senate debates, but of when to harvest this year. Last season was dry and the oil bitter. You worry that if the rains don't come soon, the yield will be low again. You consider bartering for more manure or perhaps borrowing a mule to till one of the neglected terraces. Occasionally, your thoughts drift to Rome. The distant noise of its politics seems absurd from this distance. Men chasing honor, stabbing each other over speeches and laws, while you bend to the will of the trees. You wonder if history will remember them more than the trees that have fed generations. In the afternoon, you walk the boundary of your land. You know every stone marker and every crooked fence post. Your neighbor, a man named Sextus, recently allowed his goats to graze near your olive saplings. You made no complaint, but today you see a broken branch and wonder if tomorrow you must speak. As the sun begins to lower, casting long shadows across your grove, you feel the fatigue not of stress but of labor. You carry it gladly. You make one final pass through the press room, checking the clamps and beams, making sure no rodents have found a home in the baskets. The faint smell of oil lingers in the air, a smell that is neither sweet nor foul, but purely familiar. You return home as the sky begins to turn orange. Livia is inside boiling lentils. The slaves sit outside eating their portion quietly. You nod to them. One, a younger man named Philemon, is humming. He is always humming. You do not know the tune, but it is pleasant. As the stars emerge and the cool air settles over the hills, you sit on a stone bench and look at the silhouette of your trees against the darkening sky. You think not of conquest or glory, but of how many more seasons you will walk these fields. You think of Marcus and whether he will stay or go. You think of the press and whether the beam will last one more year. And as night swallows the last of the light, you ask yourself, what does it mean to live a life that leaves no mark in marble, but feeds the world drop by drop? The year stretches forward with a kind of gentle inertia. There are no wars in your grove, no grand pronouncements echoing across the hills. The only declarations that matter are those of the soil when it grows cracked from thirst or soft with promise after rain. It is now early summer in Latium. The blossoms on your olive trees have come and gone, leaving behind small, waxy fruit. This season, the yield looks average, neither abundant nor sparse. The kind of harvest that sustains but does not prosper. It is the kind of year you are familiar with. Your days have lengthened with the light. You rise earlier, often before the sun, walking your land before the heat settles into the soil. The cicadas begin their droning chorus by mid-morning, and the air becomes thick with dust and the sweet smell of ripening olives. Your sandals stir the pebbles on your paths, the sound barely audible over the rustle of wind through branches. On most days, you speak no more than 20 words before noon. Your wife tends to the vegetable patch with mechanical precision. Her hands are stained with the green of crushed stems and the dark earth. She speaks more to the plants than to you now, her words soft and indistinct. She saves her conversation for Marcus when he visits, her voice a little lighter, touched by something that might be remembered joy. Marcus returns from the schoolhouse twice a month. His fingers now bear the ink stains of a young Roman learner, and he carries with him stories from his tutor, Herodotus, Cato, Livy. Sometimes he reads aloud, stumbling over the Greek names and Latin constructions. You listen politely, offering a nod, though the stories often feel distant. He speaks of ancient wars, of tyrants and philosophers, but you wonder if he knows how to judge a tree's readiness by the smell of its bark. When he leaves, the quiet feels heavier, not unwelcome but noticeable. You spend your afternoons maintaining the walls of your terraces, hauling rocks one at a time to reinforce what the rain has worn away. You could hire help, but you prefer to feel the stones beneath your palms. It is honest work, slow, repetitive, and endlessly necessary. The slaves, too, have settled into the rhythm. Philemon still hums his strange foreign tunes, and you sometimes catch yourself listening longer than intended. Damaris, the oldest among them, has taken to watching the horizon at dusk. You do not ask why. You do not ask them many things. You feed them, house them, and give them predictable days. They rarely speak unless spoken to. Once in your youth you traveled to Rome, just once. The city dazzled with its noise and spectacle, but it stank of ambition, of sewage, of people pressed too tightly together. You left as quickly as you arrived. You have not returned since. The trader from Rome comes again, riding his cart slowly over the rutted road that leads from the main route. His name is Spurious. He inspects the oil in your amphory with disinterest. He does not taste it, merely swirls the liquid and nods. You suspect he is distracted, perhaps involved in some distant matter of finance or family. "Same price as last year," he mutters, already looking back toward his oxen. You nod, you neither protest nor praise. Coins exchange hands. Amphory are loaded. The cart creaks back the way it came. You stand a long while watching the dust settle in its wake. In the evenings, when the sun slides low and casts long, golden lines across the grove, you sometimes walk alone through the oldest trees. These trees are not productive anymore, but you keep them, as your father did. They are twisted, hollow in places, but alive. Their branches curl like hands reaching toward memory. One evening, as you stand beside the oldest tree one your grandfather planted after his return from Hispania, you find a small bird's nest nestled in a crook. Inside, 3 pale eggs. You do not disturb it. Instead, you sit at the base and watch the light fade. Your knees ache when you rise. There is little to mark time in your life outside the harvest and solstices. You do not celebrate the festivals in full, though you observe the days when Jupiter is honored and when Ceres is thanked. A small altar rests near the well, where you sometimes leave a bit of bread or oil. You are not deeply pious, but you respect tradition. Sextus, your neighbor, speaks more these days. His goats still wander, though now he asks your permission, at least in passing. He has taken in a second wife, younger and louder than the first. Their laughter sometimes drifts across the valley. You do not mind it. Occasionally, news arrives from the roads, talk of Sulla and new laws, of land confiscations and executions in Rome. These things reach you like the faint smell of distant smoke, present but not yet dangerous. You write to Marcus occasionally, though you are not practiced with the stylus. Your letters are short, factual, and plain. The grove is your constant. It does not rebel or scheme or offer promises it cannot keep. It simply grows patiently, stubbornly. One morning you discover a tree near the edge of your land that has withered. The bark is cracked, the leaves yellowed and curled. You dig around the roots and find nothing unusual, no rot, no insects, no sign of disease. Still, the tree seems done. You do not cut it immediately. You let it stand. Perhaps it will revive. This becomes a small obsession for you. You visit the tree daily, checking for any change. You water it more than the others. You prune it carefully, but it remains motionless, lifeless. One evening, Philemon speaks. "She will not return," he says quietly, gesturing to the tree. You glance at him, unsure whether he means the tree or something else. "She gave what she could," he adds, and then returns to sharpening a pruning blade. You say nothing. The tree becomes a kind of monument, not a source of grief, but of reflection. You begin to think more deeply about what is left behind when things stop growing. What becomes of a man who, like a tree, outlives his best harvest? You wake one morning and the rain has finally come. It falls gently, soaking the soil and creating rivulets down the terraced paths. The grove drinks eagerly. You stand in the doorway of your home and inhale deeply. The scent is rich, earthy, and familiar. You wonder if Marcus smells the same rain where he is, or if, in his hunger for Rome's promise, he has forgotten how earth smells after drought. As the rain continues, you think of your father, how he too watched the skis, worried over saplings, and measured the success of his life not by wealth, but by the quiet continuity of the grove. You think of the dead tree again. You imagine what it would mean to leave it there, to let it be part of the grove's memory. And then you wonder, does something truly die when its roots still hold the earth? Or do some things remain simply because we cannot bear to remove them? The days shorten as they always do. Summer gives way to autumn with slow reluctance, like a heavy man rising from a bench. The hills of Latium turn gold and brown, and your olive grove hums with preparation. Harvest is upon you. It begins as it always does with long days and longer nights, and the quiet excitement of work that carries consequence. Each olive, each press, each sealed amphora will determine your livelihood for the coming year. But you do not rush. Rushing is for those who fear the yield. You instead move with a kind of reverence, as if each step through your grove acknowledges a pact between man and land. Marcus is home, though not for long. He has been accepted into the household of a minor magistrate in Rome as a tutor's assistant. His eyes shine with ambition. He speaks of politics and oratory, of the Forum and the Palatine Hill. He speaks quickly, as if time will run out before he can tell you everything. He no longer smells of the grove. When you hand him a pruning blade and ask him to help, he hesitates. His fingers curl awkwardly around the handle. You show him how to test the fruit with a gentle squeeze, how to know when it's ripe, not by color, but by texture and the scent released under pressure. He nods, but you can see the effort does not settle easily in his limbs. You do not scold him. You only say, every man must learn what feeds him. The slaves begin the harvest with practiced motion. Damaris moves slower this year, and you assign her to sort olives rather than climb ladders. Philemon sings louder than before, and the rhythm of his melodies seems to match the swing of the baskets as they fill. The press room becomes the center of the world. The screw press groans, the baskets weep oil, and the air becomes thick with the scent of crushed fruit. You record each batch on a wax tablet. You tally quantities, note which trees yielded more, and track oil color and clarity. Your notes are precise. The numbers matter, even if they only ever live in your memory or on a fatting tablet that no one else reads. One afternoon, as you check the final amphorae, you hear a crack from the western slope. A tree has split one of the older ones, burdened by a heavy limb that had never quite healed after a lightning strike years before. You approach slowly and run your fingers along the break. It is a clean split. You will need to cut it down. Marcus joins you. Why not leave it, he asks. You pause because rot spreads. But it's still alive. That doesn't mean it should stay, you reply softly. Sometimes survival is a burden. He says nothing. Later that week, as you sharpen your blade to remove the fallen limb, you catch Marcus watching you from the doorway. He does not offer to help, and you do not ask. He leaves again the next day, with a small purse of coins and a tightly folded letter from Livia. She does not cry, but that night, as she grinds barley into flour, you notice her rhythm falter, just once. The harvest is good this year, better than expected. The oil is thick, green gold, and clear. You seal the amphorae with wax, mark each with your initials, and stack them in the shade of the press house. When Spurius returns, he raises an eyebrow at the quality but says little else. The coin he offers is slightly better this time. Perhaps he notices your age, or perhaps he knows good oil when he sees it. In the quiet that follows the harvest, the land seems to sigh. The branches, now lighter, sway in the breeze. You walk the grove not with a list of tasks, but with a kind of meditative gratitude. Each tree feels like a companion. Each stone wall, each path, a chapter written with your hands. The dead tree you watched through the summer remains unchanged. No leaves, no shoots, no miracle recovery, but you leave it standing, not from hope but out of respect. It bore fruit for years. That is enough. In the months that follow, winter presses gently against the land. In Latium, winter does not roar, it settles like a woolen cloak. You light a fire in the evening and mend tools by the dim orange glow. Livia embroiders, her fingers slow but steady. She hums, faintly, an old song from her childhood. It's the first sound of music you've heard from her in years. Your thoughts now turn inward. You begin writing more short thoughts on wax tablets, reflections on the yield, on the rhythm of the grove, on Marcus. You write with no audience in mind. These are not letters. They are reminders, perhaps, to yourself that you existed here in this small corner of the world. You visit the altar near the well more often, not to pray necessarily, but to think. You leave bits of bread and oil. Once, you offer a lock of your hair as your mother once did, though you can't recall the meaning. One morning, you do not rise as early. Your body resists. The cold has settled into your joints more deeply this year. You no longer tend the grove every day. Philemon has taken over much of the labor. You watch him sometimes from the doorway, his body silhouetted against the groves that were once entirely yours. The sky, over time, becomes more important to you. You spend hours watching its changes, the way clouds form, how light breaks through in the afternoon, how the stars reappear with more clarity in the absence of city smoke. You receive a letter from Marcus. It is short, written in a formal hand. He has found favor in his master's house and been offered the chance to travel with him to Greece. He asks for your blessing. He does not ask to return home. You smile when you read it, not out of joy, but because the circle has closed quietly. That evening you walk once more through the grove. The wind stirs the leaves and the smell of olive wood drifts faintly from the press room. You stop by the dead tree. A bird has nested again, though the branch is brittle and cracked. You wonder how it survives. You touch the trunk, now soft with age, and whisper, "You did well." The next morning the sun rises and the grove is still. The trees sway gently in the breeze. The press house stands quiet, its stones warmed by dawn light. A few stray olives cling stubbornly to the branches. You are not seen that morning, nor the next. Philemon finds you sitting against the old tree, eyes closed, a faint smile on your face. You are still holding your pruning blade. They bury you beneath the tree. Not because it was the best, or the strongest, or the most fruitful, but because it stood when it no longer had to. Because it remained. A quiet testament to years of silent labor. And in time, your name fades from the wax tablets, the trade ledgers, and the tongues of men. But the oil continues to flow. The trees continue to bear. The land continues to hold memory in root and stone. And somewhere in the distant markets of Rome, someone tastes your oil and does not know your name. But they are fed by your life all the same. And so we ask, is legacy the mark carved in stone, or the fruit pressed in silence, passed from hand to hand, until it becomes the flavor of the world? Story 2. Daily duties in a Roman bathhouse. You wake before dawn, long before the city of Rome begins to stir. The air is still cool, holding on to the last remnants of the night. You are Titus Varenius, a balneator, a caretaker, and overseer of the public baths. Not a prestigious title, but one that affords you stability, respect among the servants and freedmen, and the privilege of serving the bathers who come to cleanse, gossip, and escape the dust of the street. Your assigned post is the Thermae of Agrippa, one of the oldest bathhouses in Rome, built decades earlier under the patronage of Marcus Agrippa. While not as grand as the newer baths of Nero or those rising across the city, it still attracts hundreds daily, from senators and equestrians to shopkeepers and aging soldiers looking to soothe worn muscles. You stretch your arms and hear the familiar creak of your back. You are not young anymore. The years of hauling wood, managing laborers, and enduring the scalding heat of the caldarium have etched their mark. You wash your face from a basin of collected rainwater and dress in a simple tunic, cinched tightly with a belt that carries the ring of a dozen iron keys. Those keys unlock nearly everything in the complex: the fuel stores, the outer gates, the slave quarters, and most importantly, the hypocaust, the underground furnace system that breathes warmth into the baths. By the time you arrive at the entrance, the city has begun to murmur. You unlock the heavy wooden door and step inside. The scent of aged stone, soot, and lingering oil greets you like an old friend. Your first task is to inspect the hypocaust. You descend into the belly of the complex with a lantern in hand. The air thickens with soot and heat as you move through the low tunnels, stooping to avoid the stone slabs that form the floor of the caldarium above. Brick piles, arranged like squat pillars, support the bathing floors and allow hot air from the furnace to flow underneath, keeping the rooms above toasty. You check for any cracks or blockages. The worst thing that can happen is for the fire to be uneven, one side scorching, the other lukewarm. You tap the bricks with your knuckle, listening for hollowness. You adjust a broken tile with practiced hands. Soon, your assistant, a Gaulish slave named Secundus, arrives with armfuls of split wood. Together, you stoke the fires, feeding them until they roar softly. You wipe the sweat from your brow and watch the flames dance in the darkness. Above ground, the other attendants begin preparing the rooms. There are 3 primary chambers: the frigidarium cold room, the tepidarium warm room, and the caldarium hot room. Your job is to ensure the water temperature is consistent, the pools clean, and the marble benches polished. You check the bronze spouts for leaks and adjust the flow of cold water from the rooftop cisterns. You make a mental note to send for more scented oil. The first bathers trickle in shortly after the 5th hour. A few senators arrive early to avoid the crowds. They are followed by scribes, merchants, and freedmen. Most carry wooden sandals and small towels. Some bring slaves to carry their belongings and help with undressing. You remain mostly invisible to the bathers. Your presence is felt only in what works: the warmth of the water, the evenness of the heat, the cleanliness of the floors. But if something fails, they notice immediately. Your success is measured by silence. In the tepidarium, a rotund grain merchant sings softly while rubbing his arms with olive oil. 2 lawyers argue quietly in the corner about a property dispute in the Aventine. You hear the familiar slap of sandals on marble, echoing as bathers move from chamber to chamber. You supervise, direct, and repair. You replace broken tiles, adjust fire dampers, and occasionally extinguish errant flames. A boy slips near the frigidarium, and you have him rest with his feet up. You send Secundus to fetch a doctor from the nearby insula. Around midday, the bathhouse is at its fullest. The din of conversation blends with the trickling of water and the soft hiss of steam. Some bathers play dice in the lounge areas, while others receive massages from hired attendants. You watch it all unfold like a conductor, ensuring the harmony continues. There are moments of tension. A patrician complains of cold water in the caldarium. You investigate and find the hypocaust on that side has damp ash, likely from poor wood. You reprimand Secundus gently. He is young and learning. You shovel in drier fuel yourself. Within the hour, the temperature has corrected. In the afternoon, a famous charioteer visits. He is younger than you expected and louder than necessary. He brings 3 slaves, one of whom carries his racing helmet like a sacred relic. The bathers whisper his name and some steel glances. You pretend not to notice. Later, as the crowds thin, you walk the perimeter of the baths. The mosaic floors, once vivid with colored tiles, are dulled in places from years of footfall. You note where the grout is loosening and where the stone benches show signs of erosion. Everything requires care. You stop to watch a small group of children splash in the shallow end of the frigidarium, laughing and chasing one another. Their parents sit nearby, their sandals removed, their expressions relaxed. It is a quiet kind of joy that reminds you why your work matters. You do not build empires. You do not write laws, but you provide a place where the weariness of the world is briefly washed away. In the late afternoon, you climb to the roof to inspect the lead piping. The sky is pale blue, and the rooftops of Rome stretch outward in every direction, tiles catching the last rays of sunlight. You see the smoke rising from other bathhouses, temples, bakeries. The city is alive, breathing in rhythm with itself. From this height you can smell the smoke from the hypocaust mingling with the sweet odor of pressed oil and old stone. You sit briefly on the ledge, your legs stiff. Below, Secundus is scrubbing the stone benches. You watch him work. You were once that boy. As twilight approaches, the bathhouse empties. You begin the slow process of shutting things down. You bank the fires to keep warmth overnight, drain the used water from the smaller pools, and lock the main gates. Secundus lingers, and you let him leave early. You are alone. You walk the now silent halls, the caldarium still steaming faintly, the tepidarium glowing in the last filtered light from the clerestory windows, and the frigidarium still holding the memory of laughter. You touch the marble walls as you pass. You know every crack, every stain, every tile by heart. And you ask yourself, as you do every night, in a city of ambition and noise, what becomes of a man who dedicates his life to warmth, water, and silence? The next day begins just as the last did before the sun rises, before the forum buzzes with gossip, before the grain sellers weigh their sacks. The streets are quieter now in these cooler months. Autumn lingers in the early morning air, carrying with it the scent of damp stone and wood smoke from nearby bakeries. You are once again inside the bathhouse before any other soul. The doors creak familiarly as you unlock them. The air inside holds yesterday's warmth like a memory. You breathe it in and start your inspection. The hypocaust still smolders faintly. You test the heat with the back of your hand near a vent. It's steady. Good. Secundus arrives late. You hear him coughing before he appears, his face flushed, his steps slow. You don't scold him. Instead, you send him to sweep the dry atrium and tell him to stay away from the hypocaust's heat today. It is a small act, but one your own master might never have offered you when you were his age. You remember when you first came to this bathhouse not as a worker, but as a boy, tagging behind your father, a stone mason. He helped patch the vaults in the tepidarium. You'd played with bits of mortar and fallen mosaic tiles, not knowing that one day the baths would be your entire world. That same vault still arches over the room, strong and silent. You run your fingers along the wall, finding the faint initials your father scratched behind the plaster before it dried. Most would never see them, but you know they're there. By the 6th hour, the bathhouse is alive again. The daily tide of humanity flows in. Old men with aching backs, ambitious youths scented with foreign perfume, women arriving during their allotted hours, whispering as they walk barefoot across the polished floors. Some guests are routine as the sunrise. You see them every day. There's the retired centurion who shuffles through the baths, his left leg dragging slightly, and always soaks for precisely 20 minutes before leaving without a word. A moneylender from the Subura who brings oil mixed with rare herbs your attendants speculate he sells more than loans. An elderly woman named Damisha who brings her own towel and asks the same questions about her skin. Still glowing, she says, every time. You've come to know these people not by their names, but by their rituals. As the keeper, you see everything. You know which bathers tip the attendants and which ones expect favors for free. You know which men stare too long at others in the apoditerium, the changing room, and which women slip messages to their lovers between chambers. It's not your place to intervene, only to ensure that the baths remain clean, safe, and undisturbed. But occasionally, things rise beyond routine. That afternoon, a brawl erupts between two young men friends by their appearance, now turned red with anger. One shoves the other into a marble basin, cracking the edge. Water spills, attendants shout, and sandals clatter across the stone as people scatter. You step in quickly, not with anger but with authority born from habit. You separate them with outstretched arms, holding their chests with your palms. You don't yell. You speak quietly and firmly. This house is for cleansing, not quarreling, you say. They back down, shame blooming on their cheeks. You fine each of them 2 denarii more than a meal but less than a day's wage. They pay without argument. You arrange for the basin to be inspected. A crack but nothing structural. Still, it is one more thing to record in your daily tablet. You return to your rounds. In the caldarium, the heat is rising. You sprinkle rose water on the hot marble benches, it hisses pleasantly, and releases a perfume that masks the heavy scent of oil and sweat. The small luxuries, you've learned, make even the most common bather feel like a senator. From a corner you hear a conversation. Two men speak in hushed tones about land in the provinces. One of them mentions Hispania, the other Syria. They use coded language as if you or the steam might overhear. You pretend not to listen, but you note their faces, just in case. You know the bathhouse is not only a place of leisure. It is also a place of politics, deals, seductions, betrayals. Words spoken in steam are often words never intended to reach the forum, but they often do. Later in the unctorium where the oil massages take place, a slave slips and spills a small vial of expensive myrrh oil. The bather, a pompous silk merchant, berates the boy loudly. You step in, calm the situation, and quietly pay for the oil from your own coin. The slave bows low in thanks when the merchant is gone. You nod but say nothing. The bathhouse, you've learned, is built on balance. Between heat and cold, order and chaos, cleanliness and human mess. It's a fragile equilibrium, and you are its silent guardian. That evening, once the guests have left and the echoes of the day have faded, you walk the hall slowly. You pause near the central pool of the tepidarium, now still and dark. The mosaic of Neptune beneath the surface is barely visible in the low torchlight. You take a seat on the edge, remove your sandals, and dip your feet into the lukewarm water. The warmth travels slowly up your legs, easing the dull ache in your knees. You lean back, staring up at the high ceiling where patches of older plaster meet newer repairs. You remember fixing them. You remember every inch. Secundus appears silently at the doorway. He hesitates, then steps forward, holding a small folded cloth. "For your shoulder," he says, his voice timid. You take the cloth, a compress soaked in cooled lavender water. He learned this from the Greek healer who came last year. You thank him. He bows slightly and leaves. You place the compress on your shoulder and close your eyes. The warmth of the pool, the weight of the silence, and the scent of stone all wrap around you like a familiar garment. And you wonder, not for the first time. When the water stops steaming, when the walls begin to crack, who will remember the men who kept Rome clean and warm? The cold has deepened across Rome. It curls around the temples and coils through the streets, threading between the cracks in stone and whispering beneath cloaks. Smoke lingers in the air, a haze of winter fires and heated kitchens. In the bathhouse, the demand for warmth grows. You rise with greater effort now. Your joints resist the cold, but you push forward with the stubbornness of habit. As you lace your sandals and adjust the belt with your iron keys, you notice your hand trembles slightly. You shake it out and continue. The bathhouse is darker this morning. The torches seem dimmer, though you know it's only your eyes adjusting more slowly. You descend into the hypocaust chamber with your lantern. The air is dense, thicker than usual. You cough once, twice. Ash clings to your skin, but this, too, is routine. The fires take longer to catch. You arrange the wood carefully, piece by piece, checking the draft vents, adjusting the airflow with precision only years can teach. By the time the flames begin to crackle with steadiness, sweat already lines your brow. Secundus arrives soon after. He's grown into the work. You no longer correct him as often. He begins checking the frigidarium for sediment, scrubbing algae from the basins, rinsing the benches with vinegar. You watch him work from the shadows of the corridor. There is pride, though you say nothing. Today is a festival day. Saturnalia approaches, and more bathers than usual are expected. The marble is polished to a dull gleam, and wreaths of pine and laurel have been affixed to columns by the attendants. It is not an official holiday yet, but already people are giving gifts, exchanging coins wrapped in cloth, whispering about bonuses, debts, and obligations. You greet each regular bather with a quiet nod. You don't speak unless addressed. Most appreciate that. Others ignore you entirely. There is comfort in that invisibility. At midday, a storm moves over the city. Rain falls hard against the terracotta tiles. The water trickles into the drainage basins and seeps through the atrium's open oculus, collecting in the shallow stone pool beneath. The smell of wet stone and steam fills every chamber. You find it peaceful. A foreign traveler enters the baths with a translator. He wears a robe trimmed with dyed threads and brings his own oil in a carved alabaster jar. You recognize the gestures of someone unfamiliar with Roman customs, the hesitation before removing sandals, the awkward silence before stepping into the tepidarium. You assign Secundus to guide him. You watch from the corner as Secundus explains each chamber with quiet care. The man smiles. They leave laughing. That evening, as the light begins to fade, the bathhouse slowly empties. The murmurs of conversation fade to dripping water and echoing footsteps. You complete your inspection, your last of the day. The caldarium is still humming with warmth. The floor slabs above the hypocaust radiating a steady heat. The frigidarium has been drained slightly, and the mosaic floor exposed once more. You sit on a stone bench outside the apoditerium. Your hands rest on your knees, calloused and dry. A fine ash has settled in the creases of your fingers. Secundus approaches. "There's talk," he says after a pause. "The baths of Trajan are opening soon." You nod. You've heard. Grander than anything before, vaulted ceilings, gardens, fountains, libraries even. Heated pools with marble imported from Numidia. A monument to imperial luxury. "Will you go?" he asks. You consider this. The Thermae of Agrippa, your bathhouse, is older now, modest, overshadowed. The crowds will thin. Some of your regulars have already spoken of trying the new facility. "I'll remain," you say simply. "This is where I belong." He says nothing more, but you sense the weight in the silence. He may go. He is young, ambitious. The new baths will need hands like his, and you would not stop him. That night you stay later than usual. You inspect the tools again, organize the oil flasks, sharpen a worn scraper, and sit for a long time in the empty caldarium. The steam wraps around you, and for a moment you close your eyes. You remember the first fire you ever lit, the panic as it sputtered and coughed smoke, the relief when it finally caught. You remember patching the vaulted ceiling with your father. You remember the child who slipped and broke his arm, the wedding proposal in the tepidarium, the senator who always brought figs and left them behind every time. So many moments quiet, unrecorded, barely even witnessed, yet somehow essential. You know the stone of this place better than your own bed. You know which pipes groan in the cold and which spouts stick if turned too far. You know the cracked tiles behind the frigidarium statue, and the spot near the furnace where the heat builds too fast if the wind is from the south. And you know deep down that your time here is ending. Not because of age or weakness or failure, but because change is inevitable, even in places built to feel eternal. When you stand, your knees protest more loudly than usual. You walk slowly through the bathhouse, extinguishing torches one by one. In the dim light, the hallways stretch longer, the shadows deeper. You pause once more in the atrium, looking up at the oculus where the rain still falls in a steady rhythm. The pool below reflects the last flicker of flame. You lock the doors behind you. The streets are slick with rain. The noise of the city is muffled, as if Rome itself has paused to listen. And as you walk home, keys clinking softly at your side, you ask yourself, when the fires cool and the voices fade, what remains of the man who kept the water warm and the silence clean? Story 3. The Insulae of Subura, Apartment Life in Rome. You awaken to the sound of footsteps on the floorboards above, and the thin, echoing voice of a fish vendor calling from the street. Your name is Gaius Lucilius Primus. You live in the Subura district of Rome, in an insula, a tall, crowded, fire-prone apartment block wedged between alleyways that rarely see sunlight. The room you rent is on the 4th floor, high enough to feel the sway of the building when the wind rushes through the Tiber Valley, but not so high that you must pay the cheaper rent reserved for those willing to climb 6 or 7 flights of uneven wooden stairs. Your room is small, barely wide enough to stretch your arms across, and your ceiling slopes downward, the beams above exposed and dusted with grime. Your walls are thin. You know this because the couple beside you argue each morning about bread and debts. The woman below coughs with the rhythm of age and dampness. A boy above you runs, always running, and occasionally drops something that shakes your ceiling with startling violence. Still, you are grateful. You are a scribe by trade, copying legal documents, contracts, and the occasional marriage record for a notary near the forum. You make just enough to afford your rent, your meals, and the occasional jug of wine. You cannot afford a domus, nor even a full apartment. But you have your own room, and in Subura that is something. You begin your morning by lighting the stub of a candle and folding your sleeping mat away. You eat cold lentils from a jar and drink water from a clay cup. You splash a little on your face to wipe away the dust of the night. There is no bath here, no water source above the second floor. You make use of the public fountains when needed. The air smells of vinegar, oil, smoke, and people. Always people. Subura is one of Rome's most densely populated neighborhoods, home to tradesmen, prostitutes, actors, barbers, bakers, and more scribes like you than the city truly needs. As you descend the stairwell, you grip the wall for balance. The stairs are steep, worn, and creak under each step. A loose chicken darts past your legs near the second floor. A neighbor yells something about rent as you pass. The street is already alive with motion. Children weave between carts. A butcher rinses his hands in a bucket already tinged red. Women argue over produce. The vigils Rome's version of firemen and watchmen move through the streets with slow authority. You pass a bakery with a shared oven. The heat seeps into the street, a welcome comfort. You know the baker, his name is Pictor. You often nod to him but speak little. Words cost energy you might need later. Your work is unremarkable. You sit on a stool in a cramped shop behind the Basilica Julia. The notary, a man named Marellus, is particular and dry. He corrects you often but pays reliably. You copy one contract after another, your handwriting disciplined and neat. Today, you write a bill of sale for a mule, a dowry agreement, and a contract for the lease of a vineyard in Campania. None of it concerns you. You are not the buyer, the groom, or the farmer. But for a few hours, you hold their futures in your ink-stained hands. You return home at dusk, the city dimming to gold. The noise never stops, it only changes flavor. Now it is laughter from the Popany wine bars, the thump of feet against wood, the low singing of a flute player who lives somewhere across the alley. The sun vanishes behind a web of tiled rooftops. Back in your room, you sit on your stool and write in your own scroll notes that mean little to anyone but you. You record what you copied today. You note how many words you miswrote. You keep a running tally of your coin. Your room smells of dust and old ink. The walls are cracked, the corners dark, but this is your space. You think sometimes of what might come next. Marriage, perhaps, though you are not rich enough to offer much. Or promotion if Marellus dies or retires, though he seems stubbornly healthy. Perhaps a room on the second floor where the water runs, or one with a window that sees more than a wall. But then you hear the argument next door resume, more muffled than before, and the crash of something breaking. And you remember that life here does not change quickly. Still it endures. You lie on your mat again. The boards creak above. The candle flickers. You hear footsteps on the stairs, then someone shouting from the street about stolen figs. And you ask yourself with a half-smile, in a city that worships marble and monuments, what becomes of those who live stacked atop one another, writing the lives of others while barely holding their own together? Morning in the Subura does not begin with a rooster's call or any dignified greeting of the sun. It begins, instead, with noise. A door slams on the floor below. A pot is dropped. Someone curses in Greek. From your narrow bedroll, you blink slowly, adjusting to the soft glow filtering in through the cracked wooden shutter, more shadow than light, but enough to know the day has started. You are Gaius Lucilius Primus, and this is your life. One room, a stool, a shelf, and a chest that holds everything you own. You dress slowly in the cool air, pulling your tunic over your head as your neighbor's baby begins to wail through the paper-thin wall. You've never seen the child, but you know its cry better than your own name. You splash your face with cold water left in a shallow bowl overnight. You sniff your armpit. It will have to do. There's no bath until the weekend, no time, and no as to spare for luxury. Outside, the insula shudders with life. You descend the stairwell carefully, your right foot still sore from last week's stumble on the second-floor step, which remains loose despite repeated complaints to the landlord. But he never climbs these stairs. He lives in a domus on the Esquiline Hill, far from the sour smells of mold and sewage that perfume the subura. At the bottom, you pass the insula's latrine communal, cracked and barely maintained. A boy is standing guard while his sister uses it. Their mother argues nearby with another woman over whose turn it was to draw water from the public fountain. You step out into the alley and inhale sharply fish, smoke, rotting vegetables, and baked bread. Your neighborhood, your city. You do not resent it. Subura is dirty, loud, and infamous for its taverns, brothels, and backroom gambling. But it is also full of life. You see the same faces every day. The cobbler tapping soles near the awning, a prostitute adjusting her shawl and sipping watered wine, a soldier off duty, sharpening his dagger while squatting on a crate. You nod to Pictor the baker, and he tosses you a crust. It's yesterday, but you thank him. He's known you since your first week here, when you showed up with ink-stained fingers and no idea how to wash your tunic properly. Your work remains the same. Long hours hunched over scrolls in Marala's cramped office. But today, something shifts. A senator's messenger arrives, a boy no older than 12 clutching a wax tablet and looking down his nose at everything around him. Maralus greets him with exaggerated humility, then hands you the tablet. You are to copy a speech. It's long, pompous, and full of rhetorical flair, far different from the land deeds and tax declarations you usually transcribe. You work slowly, carefully. The senator's words curl like ivy, looping around themselves with flourishes of pride. You pause now and then to flex your fingers and squint at the fading daylight. Maralus says nothing, but you catch him watching. Perhaps he's surprised at your concentration. Perhaps he remembers that you're not just a pair of hands. By evening, your shoulders ache. You roll the scroll, tie it neatly, and return it to the messenger. He grunts and leaves. On the way home, you stop at the fountain near the crossroads shrine. You fill a clay jug with water and rinse your hands. A small crowd has gathered nearby listening to a blind poet recite from memory. He's telling a version of the Aeneid, adding embellishments and flourishes to entertain the crowd. Children sit wide-eyed. Adults lean on walking sticks, pretending not to listen. You stand among them, holding your jug, and let the verse wash over you. You mouth the lines you know by heart. It's been years since you had time to read anything outside of contracts. Back in your room, you eat your evening meal: bread, onions, and a piece of salted fish wrapped in fig leaf. You chew slowly, savoring the salt. You think of your mother, long dead, who used to roast onions with herbs in the countryside. Your meals are simpler now, always simpler. Then you open your scroll, the one you keep for yourself, the one no one pays you to write. You jot down lines from the senator's speech. Not the whole thing, just the phrases that intrigued you, the odd construction, the way he twisted praise into accusation. You study his style. You wonder if you could do it better. The walls rattle suddenly, a loud thud above. You hear laughter, then the sound of a table scraping across the floor. It's the start of a party. Parties in Subura are rarely noble affairs. There's cheap wine, loud singing, and often broken furniture. But they are honest. People gather not to impress, but to forget. You consider joining, but you stay seated, your fingers still wet with ink. The night deepens. You read your notes again, then add one more line. The weight of words is heavier when carried by the poor. You smile. It's not poetry, not yet, but it's yours. You crawl into your bedroll, pull the worn blanket over your shoulders, and listen to the familiar sounds: the creaking above, the laughing down below, and the rhythmic drip from the crack in your ceiling. You know every note in this strange symphony. And you ask yourself, eyes closing, if no one ever sees the scrolls you write for yourself, have you truly written anything at all? You wake to the scent of smoke. It's faint at first, just a whisper on the air, beneath the usual stew of vinegar, sweat, and damp timber. But it sharpens quickly, becomes unmistakable. Burning wood. Then the unmistakable crackling sound that doesn't belong. You bolt upright, disoriented in the half-light. Your candle is still cold, untouched. The smoke is not yours. You throw open the shutter. There's shouting on the street below, panic, not the usual morning commotion. Looking down 4 stories, you see plumes of gray pushing out from a window just 2 floors below yours. A fire. Not an unusual occurrence. The insulae of Subura are famed for burning as quickly as they are built: cheap wood, dry straw, oil lamps, crowded staircases, and no one willing to pay for proper upkeep. Still, most fires pass without loss, extinguished quickly, consuming only 1 or 2 rooms. But the fear remains. You grab your small chest, the only thing of value you own, and throw your writing scrolls inside. You sling your satchel over your shoulder. It holds your stylus, your worn sandals, 2 coins, and a copy of a legal contract you've been editing for a friend. Nothing else will fit. By the time you reach the stairwell, smoke is rising fast. You push past your neighbor, the one with the endless arguments. She's carrying her child in one arm, a jug of water in the other, barefoot and wide-eyed. You grip the railing and descend quickly, ducking low. On the 3rd floor, a man is trying to throw water on the fire using a bucket. It steams and hisses, but the flames lick higher. The heat burns your cheek as you pass. The 2nd floor is already thick with smoke. You see the flames rising near the latrines, where someone likely dropped a torch after a late-night drink. You don't stop to find out. The street explodes in chaos as tenants pour from the building. Some clutch possessions: bread, statues of Larry's, a pet monkey. Others are empty-handed, barefoot, coughing, their hair matted with soot. You hear someone cry for a missing child. The crowd is too dense to find anyone. The vigils arrive late, as expected. They shout commands, form a line from the fountain to the fire, pass buckets in clumsy rhythm. They bring hooks to pull down burning timber and shovels to dig a trench if the fire spreads. It's all too familiar. You stand on the far side of the street, chest in hand, squinting into the gray. Your room, the one you've lived in for 4 years, is now a shadow behind the smoke. You cannot tell if the fire reached it. You cannot tell if anything remains. Beside you, Victor the baker wipes soot from his forehead. He offers you a drink from a clay cup. It's wine, cheap, sour, and warm, but you take it. He says nothing. Neither do you. This is Subura. Fires come and go. You survive them or you don't. As the sun climbs, the flames are beaten back. The top floor is gone, charred timber hanging like broken ribs in the sky. You hear someone weeping nearby. A boy holds a broken statue of Mercury, staring at it blankly. You remain rooted until the vigils signal that the worst has passed. Your insula is damaged but still standing. The ground floor remains. The 2nd floor is blackened. Your room, somewhere in the middle, is inaccessible for now. The landlord, of course, is nowhere to be seen. You join the growing queue at the fountain, waiting to rinse your face. The water is cold and tastes faintly of copper. You wash the soot from your arms and note that your tunic is torn at the sleeve. Nothing more. You walk eventually, nowhere specific, just away. You wander past the forum, where orators shout about grain prices and provincial wars. You pass a temple, where incense hangs thick and priests chant about renewal. You pass the basilica, where Marvelous will no doubt ask why you smell of smoke and ash. You don't stop. By midday, you find yourself at the Tiber, watching the brown water roll past the docks. A cargo ship unloads amphorae. Slaves shout. A woman sells hot chickpeas from a cart. Life continues. You sit on a stone, chest beside you, and open it. Your writing scrolls are intact, a little damp but unburned. Your stylus glints faintly in the light. You remove your personal scroll, the one you filled with observations, quiet thoughts, fragments of poetry that have no home. You run your fingers over the parchment. It still smells faintly of oil and old wood. You think of your room, the uneven floor, the leak near the corner, the draft that always found your feet in winter. You miss it, but it was never yours to keep. That evening you return. What's left of the insula is damp and charred. Most of the upper floors have collapsed. Tenants mill about, salvaging what they can. Some already sleep on makeshift pallets near the walls. Others argue over blame. Your room is gone. There's no question now. The fire took it. You stand in front of the blackened beam that once held your shutter. A scrap of burnt cloth still hangs from the frame. You wonder if it's yours. Secundus, your friend's brother, finds you there. He offers you space in his family's lower floor apartment, crowded but dry. You nod and thank him. It's not the same, but it is shelter. That night you sit on a borrowed mat beside a borrowed wall. You write by borrowed candlelight. You write of smoke, of lost walls, of the way people carry their lives in satchels and boxes, never knowing when the sky will fall. You write slowly, deliberately, not because you have time, but because the act of writing makes the room, however small or new, feel like yours. And as your eyes close, the ink drying on the scroll beside you, you wonder. If Rome is made of ashes and stone, and men like you live only in the spaces between, what part of the city will ever remember you? Story 4. A day in the life of a Roman road builder. You rise before the sun crests the hills, before the oxen stir in their pens, and before Rome sends its pulse into the provinces. The ground is still cool beneath your feet, though it won't be for long. The air smells of damp earth, crushed grass, and the faint hint of smoke from the morning cook fires. Your name is Decimus Lucius Fronto. You are a Virius, a Roman road builder. You are not an engineer or a surveyor, though you sometimes speak with them when they inspect your work. You are not in command. You do not draw lines on scrolls or issue orders in Latin polished with Greek education. You lay stone. You break earth. You carry weight, you sweat, and you build. The road you work on today stretches between Narnia and Spoltium, two quiet towns in central Italia. The Via will one day connect more than towns. It will stitch together Rome's ambitions, threading soldiers, traders, and officials across hills and valleys. But for now, it's a line of churned soil and rough estimates. You eat a cold breakfast of barley porridge and drink water from a goatskin. Your tools are simple: a pickaxe, a shovel, a set of iron chisels, a wooden mallet in your calloused hands. Nearby, a pile of statumen, the foundational stones, wait to be laid. Above them sit heaps of rubble, gravel, and the prized paving slabs, broad, flat stones that will one day feel the sandals of senators and the wheels of war. Your team is made up of slaves, freedmen, and hired laborers like yourself. You know them all. There's Tullus, who never stops humming and sharpens every tool whether it needs it or not. There's Marcus, who lost 3 fingers last summer but still works the tamping rods like nothing happened. And there's old Herminius, who claims he once helped build the Via Appia and reminds everyone of it often, and without request. Your supervisor is a former soldier named Publius Vibius, a man of few words and fewer smiles. He arrives shortly after sunrise, unrolls a weather-worn scroll of plans, nods once and points. The day's work begins. The process of building a road is slow, methodical, and repetitive. First, the ground must be cleared of trees, roots, and loose soil. Then a trench is dug deeper than most expect. This trench will house the layers: the statumen, foundation; rooter ratio, rubble; nucleus, fine gravel and cement; and finally the summum dorsum, the paved surface. You and your team spend the morning placing the statumen. Each stone must be set firmly, compacted, and checked for level. There is no margin for error. A poorly laid foundation leads to sinking, cracking, and repairs things the Republic does not appreciate paying for. Sweat clings to your tunic by the first hour. You pause only to drink and wipe grit from your eyes. The sun rises higher. The tools grow warm. You hear grunts and the rhythmic clatter of stone against metal as your team settles into the long rhythm of labor. At midday you break bread, olives, and a sliver of dried fish. You sit in the shade of a cart and listen to Tullus sing something old in Oscan. A few men laugh. Even Publius permits himself a drink and a nod. You look at the section behind you, just 15 paces long, but it's solid, straight. Already the gravel layer is being compacted above your work. Each layer is a different kind of muscle, a different kind of care. Every man here has his part to play. After lunch, you begin on the paving stones. The summum dorsum, the crowning surface, is the most visible part of your labor. These are the stones that travelers will see, that wheels will wear down, that emperors will one day ride across. Each stone is heavy, uneven, and must be shaped to fit like a puzzle without gaps. Water must flow between them, not pool. Carts must roll without jolting. The road must breathe but never break. You shape your first stone with a chisel and mallet. A chip flies toward your cheek and you flinch. Blood wells, just a scratch. You spit, wipe it clean, and continue. Your hands ache, but you barely notice anymore. Occasionally, a caravan passes nearby merchants, sometimes soldiers. They slow as they near the worksite. Some nod in thanks, others barely look. You are part of the background to them, like the trees or the hills. Few remember that every stone beneath their wagon was placed by hand. By late afternoon, a storm threatens from the east. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of rain. You work faster, not to finish, but to protect what's been done. Nothing is worse than losing a day's work to a surprise flood. You cover the gravel and stones with cloth and branches. The carts are wheeled over them to weigh them down. Tullus grumbles about the weather like it's personal. Herminius claims this reminds him of a storm during the building of the Via Flaminia, and nobody corrects him. When the rain comes, it is steady but not fierce, enough to end the day. You sit under a makeshift awning, your muscles buzzing with exhaustion. You sip lukewarm wine and chew dried fruit. Around you, the other laborers stretch, crack joints, and compare injuries. The road waits in silence, soaking. You look down at your hands, grimy, blistered, stained with the day's labor. You wonder sometimes what it means to build something you may never walk in full. This road will run for miles. You'll likely finish your section and be sent elsewhere before it reaches completion. You'll hear of its opening in the market or from some official who came to inspect it and forgot your name the moment he left. But still you build. Because every stone, every line of gravel, every compacted layer is part of something larger than you, something that will outlast you. As night falls, the wind cools and the road steams softly under the moisture. And you ask yourself, watching the clouds drift over the hills, if no one remembers who placed the stones, does the strength of the road still carry your name? The next day begins the same as all others, early, quietly, and with aching limbs. The rain has passed, leaving the earth sodden but manageable. Mist curls around the lower slopes where the road snakes between hills. Birds call from the scrub, but their song is lost beneath the first thud of pick against earth. You resume your place in the line of laborers. The gravel is uncovered, still damp but not ruined. Your careful work from the day before has held. No flooding, no displacement, that's something. Your foreman, Publius, grunts in satisfaction, a high compliment by his standards. He marks the next stage of progress with a chalked symbol on a wooden post. 20 paces forward today. Maybe 25 if the stones cooperate. The Via Publica you build is not just for foot traffic. It must hold the weight of carts, animals, and legions. You've seen what war trains look like, wagon after wagon, pulled by mules, armor glinting, noise that never ends. Roads like this carry the empire on their back. It's said that Roman roads run straighter than truth. The phrase always draws laughter from men who know better. Roads do curve around ravines, over ridges, through forests, but the engineers do their best to minimize that. Straight is strength. Straight is discipline. You work alongside Tullus and Marcus again today. The three of you lift paving stones into place, prying them with wooden levers and easing them down with rope. The paving stones are different here, local basalt, darker and more brittle than the limestone used further south. They require more patience. One misstrike with the mallet and the stone splits, wasting an hour of work. Nearby, a surveyor from the Corps of Engineers walks the length of the trench, holding a measuring rod and muttering to himself. He makes occasional marks with red chalk. He doesn't speak to you, he rarely does, but you respect his role. He sees the whole road. You see only your stretch. At midday, a mule slips on the loose gravel and collapses. Its leg is twisted. The driver curses in a dialect from further north. You offer a length of leather to bind the animal's knee. The driver grunts in thanks. Small moments like this define your days, quick bursts of decision inside the endless repetition of stone, dirt, and sweat. The road hums with activity all afternoon. Slaves carry water from a stream nearby to dampen the dust. A group of local boys watches from the hillside, laughing as one of your men loses his balance and tumbles into a wheelbarrow. You laugh too. But the work never stops. You take pride in the layering. First the statumen, then ruder ratio, then the nucleus, a kind of mortar made from crushed brick, lime, and clay. It's smoothed carefully, tamped with wooden blocks until it sets. This is what holds everything together, not the beauty on top, but the rough substance beneath. You spend hours compacting the nucleus. There's an art to it. Too much pressure and it cracks. Too little and it sags later. The earth tells you what it wants if you learn to listen. Once the nucleus is set, you help Marcus fit the next set of slabs. Each is placed with a sliver of space between, just enough to let water drain, not enough to catch a wheel. The alignment is checked, then checked again. Publius says the gods of roads demand symmetry. You believe him. As you work, your mind wanders. You think of your father who laid roads near Capua. You think of your brother who joined the Navy and drowned near Rhodes. You think of your son, who may yet learn your trade, though you hope he doesn't. There are easier ways to serve Rome. Still, when the sun begins to lower and the light softens, you look behind you. Another 20 paces, a smooth, even surface. Solid, clean, a road meant to last centuries. And perhaps that's what makes it all bearable, that knowledge, the permanence of it. You may die unknown, but the stone you laid will outlive senators, emperors, even Rome itself. That evening, a visiting official walks the new stretch of road. He wears clean boots and carries a wax tablet. He comments on the drainage ditch, the compactness of the edges, the uniformity of the slabs. You overhear him tell Publius that it is suitable for official travel. That's as high a praise as your work receives. You do not expect applause. After he leaves, you sit beside a stack of unused stones and eat a supper of cold beans, cheese, and flatbread. You share a flask with Tullus, who hums a tune from his homeland again. You do not understand the words, but the rhythm fits. The fire you build is small and smokeless. You sit around it, not speaking much. You've learned that men who spend all day shouting over hammer and chisel don't waste their evenings on idle talk. The night is quiet. The stars press close. You lie down on your back and stare upward, the stones still pressing into your spine from the day's labor. You close your eyes and think. If the emperor himself rides this road one day, will he feel the steadiness of your hands beneath his chariot? Dawn breaks over the hills of Umbria, not with grandeur, but with the slow unfolding of light through mist. The birds call low and lazy, and the scent of dew lingers in the soil. It is the third week of building this section of road, and your body no longer protests each morning, it merely accepts the aches as part of the cost of standing upright. You are Decimus Lucius Fronto. You are a road builder, and this is likely your last day on this stretch. Not because the work is done, but because new orders have arrived. Publius, the foreman, read them aloud last night with the flat tone of a man who had seen too many names come and go. The surveyors have directed that teams rotate south, toward the coast, where the roads near Ariminum have collapsed under spring floods. You will leave tomorrow. Today you work not with urgency but with presence. You notice the curve of the ditch, the way the light touches the face of a freshly placed paving stone. You adjust your grip on the hammer more deliberately. You pace yourself. You are not building quickly, you are building right. The morning is spent leveling the road shoulder, where loose gravel tapers into packed earth. It's not glamorous, but it's essential. The shoulder keeps water off the main road and prevents erosion. Without it, the road fails. Tullus is quieter today. You think he is uneasy about moving again. He has no family to write to, no roots. The road is his only home, and yet each new assignment feels like an exile. You pat his shoulder as you pass. You both understand that you won't see many familiar faces when you're reassigned. You mark the last stone in your section with a shallow line, just one groove, running from edge to edge. Not a signature, not even a symbol, just something. Years from now, if someone ever repairs this road and sees that line, they'll know a human hand placed it. The afternoon brings visitors locals from a nearby vicus who come bearing a cart of baked loaves and dried fruit, an offering of sorts. Their children run barefoot across the dry parts of the new road, laughing at the echo their feet make on the flat stones. You smile. The road is not open yet, but already it serves. One of the elders speaks with Publius in low tones. You catch only parts of it, something about safety, about bandits in the hills, and how the road will bring soldiers faster when needed. You think of all the things a road does that no one sees. It carries grain to the hungry. It moves physicians to the sick. It brings letters, law, judgment. It enables conquest. It spreads rumor and hope in equal measure. It is not just stones and mortar. It is the nervous system of the empire. By evening you begin breaking down camp. The awnings are folded. The tools are oiled and packed. You wash your hands with water from a dented basin, watching the dust run in ribbons down your arms. Your palms are scarred, your fingernails blackened. Publius approaches quietly. He's not a sentimental man, but he nods once in your direction. You worked clean, he says. You nod back, that's enough. As night descends, the road is silent. No carts, no footsteps, no conversation. Just a line of stone through the hills, catching moonlight in its joints. You walk it one last time. Each slab is familiar beneath your sandals. You count the paces, noting every joint, every incline. You pause at the section where you laid your last paving stone and trace your fingers along the edge. The road will continue long after you're gone. Others will finish it, repair it, walk it. One day, merchants will grumble about its bumps. Soldiers will sharpen blades beside its milestones. Children will learn its name from their tutors. Maybe, centuries from now, someone will write of it on a scroll or carve it into a stone marker. But none will know you were here. And that's all right. Because the road remembers. Not in name, but in presence. In every smooth wheel turn, in every footfall that doesn't falter, in every rainstorm that drains cleanly into the ditches you dug by hand. You turn back to camp, where the others are already asleep, curled beside bundles of rope and baskets of gravel. The fire crackles low. You lie beneath the stars, arms crossed over your chest, the scent of stone and sweat still clinging to your skin. And before your eyes close, you wonder. If roads are built to last forever, what does that make the men who laid them forgotten tools, or the very bones beneath the empire? Story 5. The Bureaucrat of the Grain Dole. The day begins with the rustling of parchment. You, Marcus Rubellius Cotta, Are a grain dole administrator, one of the many faceless scribi who operate within the grain offices of Rome. You serve the cura annani, the great machine that ensures the capital's belly remains full. You are not powerful, not in the way senators are, nor particularly wealthy, but you are entrusted with something few in the city understand: the numbers that keep the people from revolting. You dress in a modest toga, not the kind that sweeps elegantly across the forum, but one worn thin at the hem, patched near the shoulder. Your tunic underneath is clean, and your stylus is already tucked behind your ear. You eat a small breakfast of bread and cheese while glancing at a cracked wax tablet listing yesterday's figures. 835 loaves distributed at the Porta Trigemina, 28 disputes, 1 injury, 7 complaints, 5 spoiled sacks. You walk to your office through the chaos of early Rome. The sun has only just risen, but the subura is already loud. Vendors set up stalls, pigs squeal from carts, and beggars stake out their usual corners. You pass through the Forum Boreum, where the smell of livestock never truly fades. Past the Porticus Aemilia, where granaries stretch like ribs toward the river. Massive buildings, full of shadow, heat, and grain. Your workplace sits beside one of them. It is unimpressive, a long stone building with a slate roof and a set of dusty clerks' benches. Inside, a handful of scribes are already seated, scratching notes and adjusting their records. You nod to each and slide into your seat. Your desk holds 2 things: a scroll case and a locking box. From the scroll case, you withdraw the tesserae frumentarii, small clay tokens, each engraved with a name or code, distributed to eligible Roman citizens. The holders present these tokens at the designated distribution point in exchange for a monthly grain allotment. You manage their issuance, confirm identities, and record redemptions. From the box, you retrieve today's ledgers. You work by candlelight, though the window lets in faint gray light from the alley. Your pen scratches a familiar rhythm. Your ink-stained hands move without thought. This is what you do. By the 6th hour, you begin your inspections. You walk to the granary floor, dark, wide, and filled with the heavy smell of dust and grain. Workers load sacks onto carts bound for the city's distribution points. You supervise as one load is weighed. It comes in light. You frown and mark the discrepancy. "Rats," says the foreman. "Always rats," you reply. You inspect the sacks. A few do show signs of chewing, but not enough to account for the loss. You say nothing. You'll dock the foreman's inventory allotment slightly. Not enough to provoke a complaint, but enough to balance your books. Back in the office, a man waits with his token. He is ragged, thin, nervous. "It was damaged in the flood," he says, holding up a cracked tessera. You check the roster. His name is not there. You ask questions. Where was he registered? Who issued the token? He hesitates. You press further. He stammers, then flees. You do not chase. It happens often. Fraud is common. The dole feeds hundreds of thousands in Rome. Even a small miscount, even a handful of stolen sacks, could tip the balance from peace to riot. The city depends on men like you, quiet, cautious, and aware of how easily order dissolves when the bread runs out. Later, you attend the daily tally at the Forum Halatorium. Local distributors gather to report their day's counts. You sit at the edge of the group, taking notes, comparing numbers. One site ran short by 50 loaves. Another had a fight break out over queue skipping. You write it all down. You ask questions, nod at excuses, and note the patterns. Patterns matter. You return to the office at dusk and record the day's numbers. You note that Porta Trigemina continues to draw more claimants than its quota allows. You recommend moving a portion of the allotment to a neighboring gate. You draft a note to the Prefectus Annani, though you doubt he will read it. The sun sets and your office empties. You remain, reviewing ledgers by lamplight. You wonder, as you often do, how many sacks of grain truly reach the mouths that need them. How many disappear into pockets? How many are watered down, mixed with sand, or sold off to bakers who will resell them at a markup. You are not naive. You know the corruption. You see it daily. But you also see mothers with children in tow, holding tokens like treasure. You see veterans missing limbs, waiting patiently in line. You see old women who have lived through more emperors than you've read about, clutching their sack of grain as if it were gold. And you keep the books balanced for them. As the night deepens and your candle burns low, you close your ledgers. You lock them carefully, return the tesserae to their case, and draw the shutter on the window. Outside, the street is quiet. Tomorrow, it all begins again. You walk home in silence, the scent of flour and ink still clinging to your sleeves. And you ask yourself, as you do every night, in a city that praises the sword and the scroll, who honors the hand that measures the grain. You rise early, though your work begins late. The grain doesn't move until the carts do, and the carts don't roll until the city has woken. But the habit of early hours has sunk into your bones, and so, long before the streets stir, you light your lamp and review the ledgers again. The ink has dried unevenly on yesterday's tally. You notice a small error in one entry 5 loaves overstated at the Aventine gate. You correct it with a line and a note. It is not significant, but you know better than most how the smallest imbalance can multiply. You drink watered wine and chew a slice of bread from your allotment course, but fresh. The same flour the rest of the city receives, ground from grain delivered by ships up the Tiber and hauled inland by ox cart. If not for the ships, the city would starve in a matter of weeks. You sometimes wonder if the people know how fragile it all is. At mid-morning, the office fills with scribes and dust. Scrolls are unrolled, ledgers passed hand to hand. The walls are lined with clay tablets that bear names carved into their surface. Citizens enrolled in the fermentatio, the public grain distribution. Each name represents a mouth to feed, a family to sustain, a riot to prevent. Today, the prefectus Anani himself visits. He enters without ceremony, a tall man with a face like carved stone, flanked by 2 silent aides. He greets no one by name. He carries a small stack of correspondence and a heavier scroll of new regulations, imperial directives from the palace on Palatine Hill. You stand when he enters, everyone does. He speaks curtly about recent thefts from the grain barges and demands stricter oversight of token validation. He warns of increasing disorder in the subura and urges a redistribution of surplus stock toward the outer gates. You make notes, ask a careful question about resource reallocation. He answers without looking at you, already turning to leave. You sit once more. Later, a woman arrives at your desk. She is old, her back bent, eyes milky but alert. She hands you her tessera and waits. You check the token against the list. It's worn, the markings nearly faded. Her name, Tullia Albina, is still legible. She has claimed her grain each month for 24 years. You find the entry and mark her redemption. She says nothing, only nods. You hand her a stamped chit for collection at the nearest portico. She leaves as she came in silence. Next comes a young man, maybe 20, with a brand new tessera. He says little, fidgeting as you examine the token. The name matches, but something in his demeanor makes you pause. He avoids eye contact, and his clothes are too fine for someone reliant on state grain. You ask where he registered. He gives a vague reply. You nod and write a mark beside his name, a small glyph only your office understands. It flags the case for follow-up. You say nothing more. He leaves, token stamped. You suspect he's acting on behalf of someone else. Maybe a dead relative. Maybe a bribe to get on the rolls. It doesn't matter. You'll find out later. The rest of the day is a blur of small transactions, each one simple, yet critical. You distribute grain vouchers, record complaints, update the rolls. You listen to whispers from laborers who suspect their overseer is skimming the sacks. You jot a note to inspect. You file a petition from a widow whose name was struck off the list due to clerical error. You promise to look into it. By mid-afternoon, a minor panic erupts outside. A cart overturns near the porticus minutia. The sacks split open and grain pours onto the stones. Dozens rush to collect what they can before guards intervene. You run to the scene with two other clerks. The driver is frantic, claiming the axle cracked. You inspect the wood. It's old, dry, poorly maintained. A mistake, not sabotage. Still, the crowd has grown large. Men argue with guards. A woman screams that she was pushed. Another claims her token was stolen. You calm the situation with practiced authority, directing the guards to restore order and gather the salvageable grain. You hand out 5 emergency chits to replace the ruined sacks and make a note in your journal for official review. When you return to the office, your hands are dusty and your tunic is damp with sweat. You sit heavily and continue the records as if nothing happened. At dusk, you walk to the warehouse near the river. The scent of grain dust fills your nose. You inspect the storage sacks stacked high, sealed in waxed cloth to protect against moisture and rats. The workers nod as you pass. You inspect the ledgers, cross-reference weights, and approve a shipment bound for the Aventine district. Everything checks out. Everything always must. As you exit, a light rain begins to fall, soft and steady. The cobbles shine in the fading light. You pull your cloak tighter and walk toward your small rented apartment. You pass the line of citizens at the western gate, already forming for tomorrow's distribution. They huddle beneath cloaks, whispering, laughing, some arguing. You recognize a few faces' names from your ledgers, now clothed in flesh and fatigue. You pause and watch them, not as a clerk, not as a cog in the grain machine, but as one of them, a Roman, a man who knows that a hungry crowd can become a mob, that a delayed shipment can ripple through a city like a crack in a dam. And you ask yourself, as you turn away, if the empire rests not on armies or laws, but on the steady rhythm of bread reaching hands, then isn't the quiet weight of your pen the most powerful tool in Rome? It is dies frumentaria grain day. You arrive at the porticus minutia vetus before sunrise, long before the queues form. The plaza is nearly empty, just the silhouettes of columns stretching into the blue-gray morning and a handful of early risers huddling near the arches. The air smells faintly of river mist and wet stone. It will not stay quiet for long. By the 8th hour, thousands will be here. You, Marcus Rubelius Cotta, will be waiting for them, scrolls in hand, ink pot steady, surrounded by the murmurs and weight of Rome's hunger. Today is not for balancing ledgers. Today is distribution. Inside the porticus, your colleagues prepare the tables. Wooden barriers guide the queue into lanes. Each table bears a list: names, tesserae codes, household numbers, and the allotted amount for each registered citizen. The clay tokens themselves are gathered in small bowls, stacked by district. Each is checked, stamped, and collected upon redemption. You supervise 2 lanes. The sacks of grain arrive first, hauled from the river docks by ox carts, stacked carefully beside each table. You inspect the seals, mark the contents, and nod to the porters. The sacks are heavy, coarse-woven, and bear the black sigil of the prefectus Annani. Soon the plaza begins to fill. Old men with crooked backs, mothers holding 2 or 3 children by the hand, blind veterans with wooden staves, laborers in dusty tunics, widows who speak to no one. They come in silence or in chatter or in complaint, but they come. You recognize many by sight now. You've been in this post for 5 years. Faces return again and again. Some age in front of you, some vanish without explanation. The first woman in line is Livia Gaiata, widowed in the bread riots 7 winters ago. You stamp her tessera and hand her chit to the porter, who places a sack into her arms. She nods. You mark her name. Next comes a man missing 3 fingers, an injury from a collapsed insula. He shuffles forward, token in hand, eyes tired. You check his name, Castor Decianus. Approved. You stamp and nod. The grain is placed in his cart. Each case passes like this one at a time, each a person folded into a system of names and quantities. You take no pleasure in it, but you take great care. There is dignity in this act, even if no one sees it. By midday, the sun hangs overhead and the air thickens with heat and dust. The line is unending. One clerk collapses, overcome by the press of people and sun. He is helped to shade, and you cover his table until a replacement arrives. There is a scuffle at the far end, a man trying to cut the line. You send a guard. He is removed. The people grumble, but they remain. Rome has trained them in patience where bread is concerned. You eat a piece of dried fig between names. You sip water. You press on. Each time your stylus touches the wax, each name marked and cleared, you are reminded that this is not charity. It is policy. It is governance. It is survival. The grain dole fermentatio is the lifeline of the plebs urbana. Without it, the city would collapse in days. No law, no wall, no legion can quiet a starving mob. You remember the riots after the Alexandrian grain shipment failed to arrive. The fires, the looted bakeries, the senator who barely escaped his domus before it was torched. It was your office that had to ration the remaining grain, cut the allotments, hold emergency distributions by torchlight, calm the city with math and hope. You remember, and you still flinch at the sound of sudden shouting. By the 9th hour, the plaza is thinning. The sun begins to dip. The line grows shorter, the sacks fewer. You sit straighter, checking and double-checking the names. No errors, no missing names. You have your own system and you trust it. The final token is presented by a child no more than 10. She holds it with 2 hands, clutching it like a coin. You ask her name. She stammers. You find it in the registry. Her mother is dead. She now collects in her place. You stamp it and mark the record. You give her a chit, and 2 porters gently place a sack into her arms. She cannot carry it alone. Another woman from the crowd steps forward to help. No words are exchanged. When the plaza empties, you help count the remaining sacks. Only 4 untouched. That's good. Very good. You cross-reference the unused tokens. 3 were not claimed. 1 was rejected as a duplicate. You note it all. The records will be stored in the grain office, where they'll gather dust alongside hundreds of scrolls just like them. No one will read them unless there's a scandal. You remain at your desk into the early evening, writing your final tallies by lamplight. Your hand cramps. You stretch your fingers and look out through the colonnade toward the river. Barges drift slowly on the Tiber, their hulls full of promise or famine. It all depends on the weather, the politics in Egypt, the competence of port supervisors. But today, no one went hungry. You leave your wax tablet open on the desk and walk slowly toward the water. You pause at the dock, watching grain dust catch the light, and wonder not for the first time. Will anyone remember the men who made sure Rome did not starve, so that others could claim to rule it? Story 6. Letters from a Roman Schoolboy. The day begins with the sound of a stylus tapping against wood. Tap, tap, tap. Steady, rhythmic, not from concentration but from boredom. You are Gaius Aelius Minor, aged 10 years, son of a minor equestrian bureaucrat and a mother with ambitions for poetry. You are also a student discipulus at the local Ludus Literarius, a small, stuffy schoolroom wedged into the back of a bookseller's shop not far from the Esquiline Gate. You sit hunched on a wooden stool, a wax tablet on your knees and a half-broken stylus in your hand. Your tunic itches. Your sandals pinch. The boy beside you, Sextus, smells faintly of pickled fish, and the boy behind you, Lucius, likes to jab your back with his knee when the teacher isn't looking. You would rather be anywhere else. The Ludi Magister, your teacher, is an elderly Greek freedman named Philon. He is thin, gray-bearded, and speaks in a rasp softened by decades of forced patience. He carries a long wooden rod, which he taps against the floor when he speaks, occasionally against a desk, rarely against a hand. Philon does not shout. His quietness is more terrifying. This morning, he recites from memory the opening lines of the Aeneid, voice low and even. Armaverum cano, troia qui primus ab oris. You write the line on your tablet slowly, the wax resisting your stylus. You are expected to copy it 10 times and recite it by midday. You know the lines. You've heard them every week since Saturnalia, but still, your mind drifts. Outside the day is warm. You can hear birds. Somewhere a cart rolls by, its wooden wheels clacking on the stones. A dog barks. You steal a glance at Sextus, who is drawing a crude version of the teacher in the corner of his wax. The nose is exaggerated. The rod is twice as long as real life. You stifle a laugh. Philon notices. He always notices. Perhaps you'd like to recite the next line for the class, he says without raising his voice. Your heart jumps. You stand slowly, knees wobbling slightly. You speak. Litura, multimileat terras iactatus et alto. It tumbles out almost right, almost. Philon nods, sit. You sit. The rest of the morning blurs in a cycle of memorization and repetition. You chant conjugations, decline nouns, and practice writing the same phrases again and again. You learn about the geography of Italy, though you've never left the city walls, and recite facts about provinces you cannot picture. There is no lunch, only a brief pause to chew dry bread and sip watered wine. Then the lessons resume. Afternoons are for writing practice and moral lessons. Philon reads from Cato the Elder's Distichs, quoting maxims about virtue, obedience, thrift, and silence. Virtue, not birth, makes a man noble. You are expected to copy this 5 times. You write it slowly. Virtus non origo facit nobilum. You wonder what it means. You are the son of a man who owns 3 slaves and collects census duties in the Subura. You are not noble, but you are not poor. Still, you sit on the same stool as the baker's son, reciting the same lines. Occasionally, letters arrive for you. Not real letters, messages from your mother, sent via her servant, written in lavender ink with neat, artistic lettering. Remember to keep your back straight. Write cleanly. You represent the family name. Do not let your thoughts wander. Rome was not built on distraction. You do not reply, but you keep the letters. Folded in your satchel, tucked beside your broken wax tablet, is your own message, a half-composed letter you've never sent. Dear Father, I know you are busy, but today we learned the Aeneid again. Philon says Troy had to fall so that Rome could rise. Do you think that's true? Sometimes I wonder if our home is a new Troy or an old Rome. Your son, Gaius. You haven't shown it to anyone. You don't know why you wrote it. It won't be sent. As the sun lowers, the classroom grows warm. The boys fidget. One begins to doze. Another drops his stylus. Philon raps the floor with his rod. Only one man in this room may rest, he says, and he is not sitting among you. The lesson ends with dictation. You scratch another phrase into the wax. Patiens est fortis, he who endures is strong. You recite it once, then again. Then the tablet is wiped and the day is done. Outside, the streets are full of motion, merchants closing stalls, women buying vegetables, men arguing near fountains. You walk home slowly, alone, wax tablet under your arm. Your mother greets you at the door with a kiss on the forehead and a glance at your posture. Did you speak today? You nod. Did you listen? You nod again. She smiles, satisfied. Good, Rome needs thinkers. You eat lentils and barley at the small wooden table in the courtyard. Your father is not home yet. You imagine him sorting ledgers by lamplight, calculating taxes with the same precision that Philon demands from poetry. After dinner, you sneak to your corner, light your own small lamp, and open your scroll. You do not copy Virgil. You write your own lines. Today I learned a line that means, Even the strongest man suffers. I wonder if the strongest boys do too. I am 10, but my hands already hurt from holding Rome up. You pause. You do not know if it's poetry. Philon would likely scoff, but it's yours. You tuck the scroll away and lie down, watching the firelight flicker on the wall. Somewhere in the distance, a flute plays, a woman laughs, dogs bark, life stirs outside the words. And you ask yourself just before sleep, if I forget the lines of Virgil one day, will I still remember how it felt to hold the stylus for the first time and want to say something of my own? Another week passes, though you measure time less by the calendar and more by what lines Philon has made you copy. It is spring, technically, but the air is still dry and cool in the mornings. You walk to the ludus each day beneath rustling fig trees and alongside fruit sellers setting up their stalls. You count the cracks in the paving stones and dodge carts of amphorae. The city wakes slowly, but your feet know the way. The days blend. You learn parts of the 12 tables by law, by repetition, by sheer force of will. Philon has turned stern this week, with a visible glint of disappointment in the class's inability to memorize the first 6 maxims. You hear him mutter in Greek between lessons, asking the gods for patience. He is particularly frustrated with Lucius today, who cannot remember the difference between mulier and uxor, or how many asses make a denarius. You know both facts by heart, but even that knowledge does not bring joy. It only keeps the rod away. When it is your turn to recite, Philon calls you forward not to a desk, but to the front of the room. You are ahead, he says without kindness, but not without recognition. You will copy out an official letter. You are surprised. This is something only the older boys do, those nearly ready to apprentice with scribes or clerks in the public offices. You nod and sit at the master's desk. He places a fresh sheet of papyrus before you, coarse, yellowed at the edges but finer than wax. He begins dictating. To the magistrate of the Vicus Eugarius. It has come to our attention that grain deliveries in your district are incomplete. This must be remedied before the Ides. Failure to comply will result in a formal complaint to the aediles. May this be resolved with the diligence expected of your office. Signed, Prima Scriba, Officium Frumentarium. Your hand shakes slightly as you dip the reed into the ink. Each letter must be straight, each line must run true. You do not breathe as you write. When you finish, Philon lifts the letter and holds it to the light. He grunts, adequate. You almost smile. That afternoon, the school receives a visitor, a grammaticus, a teacher of literature and higher study. He wears a cleaner tunic than Philon and speaks with a softer accent. His sandals are polished. The older boys straighten their backs when he enters. He is here to observe, perhaps to recruit, or perhaps simply to remind you all that after the literarius comes something harder, something grander if you are chosen. He watches your class recite from memory the fables of Phaedrus. You choose the one about the wolf and the lamb. The moral, might makes right. You wonder if that applies to your father's work too. The grammaticus nods approvingly. You do not know whether it is at you or at the room. Afterward, Philon calls you aside. He hands you a scroll, clean, crisp, tied in red thread. This is a composition prompt. Complete it. You have 2 days. You nod. You feel a strange heat in your chest, pride, perhaps, or dread. When you return home, your mother is already waiting. She sees the scroll and raises her eyebrows. So, she says, he noticed. You shrug. She sits beside you at the garden table, plucks a fig from the bowl, and cuts it with a small bronze knife. You know, she says, I once wrote poems for Senator Calpurnius's wife. She had no talent for verse, but needed words to impress her dinner guests. You blink. Did she pay you? Of course, she says, in fabrics mostly. You both laugh. Later, under torchlight, you unroll the scroll. The prompt is simple. Describe the ideal Roman citizen, in form, in duty, in action. You frown, not because you don't know what to say, but because you've heard so many versions before. You stare at the ceiling of your room for some time. Then slowly, deliberately, you begin to write. The ideal Roman is not one who conquers, but one who records. He writes the contracts, weighs the grain, stamps the seal. He endures long speeches and longer silences. His glory is not shouted in the forum, but whispered in scroll rooms. He knows the price of failure is not exile, but error. He lives not in marble, but in ink. It is not elegant, but it is yours. You hide it in your satchel. The next day, Sextus shows you a frog he has caught near the fountain. Lucius tries to name it after Philon, and you all laugh until the teacher arrives. Philon does not scold you. He says only, laughter is useful, but learning is urgent. You copy more tables, more verses, more definitions, but your mind stays with the scroll in your bag. Later, when the day ends and the plaza glows gold in the late sun, you walk slowly past the Temple of Concord, watching adults shout about laws and debts. You wonder if one day you will walk there in a toga, scroll in hand, ready to argue not about wars or gods, but about grain, ink, or missing figures on a ledger. And you ask yourself, if all Rome remembers are the generals, who will remember the boys who became scribes and kept the city's memory alive, one wax tablet at a time? The day of presentation arrives with the quiet weight of a funeral. Philon doesn't announce it. He simply enters the classroom, sits at his worn desk, and unfolds a long sheet of papyrus. You and the other boys understand at once. Today, your compositions will be read aloud. It is not an exam exactly, but it may as well be. You shift uncomfortably on your stool, the wood digging into the back of your knees. The scroll with your essay rests in your lap, damp from the sweat of your palms. You have read it over a dozen times. You still don't know if it's good. Philon reads the first few aloud. They speak of valor, strength, ancestors who fought at Cannae or in Gaul. They describe Roman citizens as soldiers, heroes, defenders of temples and law. One compares the ideal Roman to a lion bold and unyielding. When Philon reaches yours, he pauses. His eyes scan the scroll. For a moment the room is completely silent. Then he begins to read. The ideal Roman is not one who conquers, but one who records. You feel your classmates shifting. Some glance at you. Sextus is wide-eyed. Lucius is chewing his thumbnail. Philon reads slowly, clearly, and with no expression. When he finishes, he sets the scroll down, folds his hands, and looks at you. Unusual, he says. A pause. True, he adds after a moment. Sit straighter tomorrow. That's all. But your chest fills with something warm, difficult to name. Not pride exactly, not relief either, but the strange recognition that you have been seen, that something inside you was put into words and the words didn't fail you. That afternoon, when the school bell is dismissed and the class disperses into the streets of the Subura, you walk more slowly than usual. You linger at the fountain where laundry drips from clay rooftops and old men mutter about the games. You pass the butcher shop where chickens hang upside down beside garum jars. You pass the bookseller's stall, where a copy of Aeneas's Annals sits curled beside a volume of Greek plays, and you wonder how long words last. At home, your mother greets you with her usual question, "Did you behave?" You nod, she knows the answer anyway. That evening, you open the scroll one last time. You read your own words by lamplight. They feel different now, not better, but heavier, like they belong to something larger, not a school assignment, something else. You wonder what would happen if you wrote not for school, but for memory. If you wrote not what you were told to think, but what you truly saw about Philon, who walks with a limp and teaches boys who forget him. About your father, who counts others' wealth but owns little himself. About Rome, which shines so brightly that few ever notice its cracks. And you wonder, not for the first time, if you grew up to be just another scribe, just another clerk in a long line of ink-stained officials, would that be failure? Or would it be the only thing keeping Rome together? The empire, after all, is made of stone and sword, but also wax and papyrus and the tired hands of schoolboys. Later in bed, you begin a new scroll, not an assignment, not for Philon, just for you. You title it De Vita Quotidiana on Daily Life. It starts with a sentence you aren't sure is good. Rome is loud in the morning and louder in the evening, but in the quiet hours of study, you can hear it think. You pause. You don't know if this scroll will last. It might be lost in a fire, eaten by rats, forgotten in a drawer. But for now, you are writing it. That is enough. You blow out the lamp. And as the darkness settles, a question floats through your thoughts, gentle and persistent. What if the truest history of Rome isn't written by generals but by boys like you, who listened, copied, and dared to write their own lines?